So good evening, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations peoples. So I know here where I am in Vancouver, those peoples are the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But many of you are on the land of other nations. So if you'd like, please feel free to write those nation names in the chat. And always, let's just remember our connection to our siblings in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. So welcome. This is our last session out of our 6-session series on the afterlife. And now when you're ready, over to you, Harold.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy. Yes, I'm always happy and sad at the last session. You know, I like to finish things that I start, but it's a little bit sad to say goodbye, at least for a time being, to people that have done some exploring together. Thank you for hanging in this long. Those of you who've been here a whole half a year. We started back in September, looking at near-death experience and indigenous beliefs about the afterlife, and then we went to South Asia or India. Then we looked at Far Eastern views, Middle Eastern views, Zoroastrian and Islamic. Then last month, we looked at Jewish, Greek, and Christian views. And so in this last session, we're going to look at what I call contemporary spiritual views and the Baha'i views. And maybe I hope this will remind us of the whole sweep of what we've been trying to do. And we'll sort of reflect on the whole course, if you're willing. You know, I think the purpose of this course, I tried to emphasize this the first day, but looking at beliefs about the afterlife is a way of clarifying or accenting, you might say, moral and spiritual purposes of this life. You know, so in other words, when we have an afterlife perspective on this life, it looks a little different. And the emphasis is on, you know, being in good relationship with other people and cultivating moral and spiritual purposes. That's what learning about afterlife views tends to bring to our attention. So it's very practical to study something like the afterlife. It has some moral and spiritual consequences for our own views as we live in this world. I'd like to look at that chart, the 4 realms chart that I've given you. And I just really want to remind you why that chart is so important, at least to me. The chart talks about levels of reality, including the afterlife realm and the realm of revelation or the transformative realm and the ultimate or divine realm and the earthly realm. And we're in this unique position as human beings. We have one foot in the natural realm and another foot in the spiritual realm. And so also the idea of realms or levels is a way of comparing beliefs across traditions. And in my mind, it shows a lot of commonality that humanity as a whole, in many different ways, has divided reality up into these realms. And of course, there's sub-realms. For example, the natural world has the realm of human beings and animals and plants and minerals, which are at different levels as well. Okay. So I want to just give you some of the terms that are used in 2 traditions for these 4 realms. One tradition could be called, people who are spiritual but not religious and who draw from a scientific worldview. It seems to me that people who are spiritual but not religious are open to the insights of science, especially as it reveals, mysteries and wonders of the universe. The term being of light is not on the chart, but that's a term that's used by people who have near-death experiences and who don't want to necessarily say God or Creator or Christ or Allah. They say they met a being of light. Scientific terms, for that realm might be quantum potential, all quantum potential, the realm of possibility. Then the realm below that from a scientific point of view, is sometimes called the implicate order by physicists like David Bohm. And the term used by people who are spiritual but not religious, might be the Dharma or logos, even the structure of reality or the source of the order in the universe. Baha'i terms for the divine realm are quite typical, like God and Creator, but also the unmanifest for the highest realm, the unmanifest, because the realm right below that is called the manifested realm for Baha'is. And manifestations of God are figures like Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah, believed to be intermediaries between the ultimate realm and the human realm. Okay, so in the afterlife realm, you hear terms like the realm of the departed on the part of spiritual people, or it's even scientifically oriented people might call it the realm of non-local consciousness, consciousness in a higher realm or another realm that's not associated with a specific brain or mind. We'll get to that later when we introduce the spiritual but not religious orientation regarding the afterlife. In terms of Baha'i terms for the afterlife, the higher world, the realm of angelic beings, the realm of spirit, the kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven is sometimes used, the next world, etc. And then in the earthly realm, that's the realm of spiritual growth, according to people who are spiritual but not religious, human existence in this world, the natural order. And Baha'is use terms like the indwelling spirit or the realm of the spirit that's embodied. We have souls or spirits within human beings. It's a realm of questing, and also it's called the creation and its creatures. Same terms used by many traditions to describe the earthly realm. Okay, so that's just a reminder that different faith communities and spiritual orientations use a similar map to understand realms of reality going up to the highest realm. Okay, I'm looking at page 1. Friends, I gave you 8 pages. Oh, I'm sorry, that's too many pages. But don't worry, we're not going to try to, read every word or talk about every concept. I'm going to pick and choose. But in general, this session I'm picking out 2 contemporary groups plus Baha'i. So we're looking at really 3 groups. One group I'm calling humanistic and agnostic people. And then another group could be called spiritual and unaffiliated, or spiritual but not religious. When I was a Unitarian minister, both of those belief groups were there aplenty. So I feel like I'm a diplomat between humanists and spiritually oriented people and the world religions. That's part of being a community interfaith educator. I tried to be diplomatic and respectful of all points of view. I got a lot of practice doing that as a Unitarian minister for 25 years. Because I had people in my congregation who completely, you could call them atheists, non-believers in an afterlife realm, some who are open to the possibility, especially because of near-death experience and their own spiritual experiences, and then others who had more traditional views of the next world. Okay, so humanists, if they tend to be suspicious of revelation, of the claim that there is divine guidance written down for humanity, suspicious of that claim, but sometimes believe in a cosmic order, a benevolent universe that's shaped for humanity's growth and development. And then they may be open to near-death experience research, and they may not be. They may be skeptical of it. Now, the spiritual but not religious group is intensely interested in near-death experience. At least this is what I see. Very interested in that. They say that opens up higher levels of reality. They may have even had a near-death experience themselves. In any case, they're used to the vocabulary and the reporting of a higher realm. It seems to me the theme of the spiritual but unaffiliated is lifelong spiritual growth and planetary advancement. People who are spiritual but not religious can be very interested in, say, saving the earth, the climate crisis, environmental concerns, eco-spirituality, ethical concerns, interfaith cooperation, all of that. You could say the same thing of humanists and agnostics. They sometimes like to, help with interbelief cooperation and projects. Friends, at the bottom of page 1 is just a reminder of these, you might say, the stages of near-death experience. And, to me, the thrilling thing is that the accounts of near-death experience, when collated and compared, are roughly parallel, or you might say complementary to what different faith traditions say about life after death, or life after life on this planet. So here are the stages. I'm just reminding you of them. We looked at these the very first session, but a sense of being dead, then a sense of, I'm in another realm, a sense of peace and painlessness after the initial pain of seeing people taking, missing you or gathered around your body. Then another kind of out-of-body experience where you feel like you're looking at things in a much broader perspective, going upward. A tunnel experience. See, these are things described by everyone pretty much who has a near-death experience. You see people of light or beings of light that you sometimes recognize according to the accounts. Then a being of light who leads you on some kind of a replay of your whole life. You're seeing the basic moral patterns of your time on earth. And that's life review. The being of light helps you take that life review and learn from it. Then there is reported rising rapidly through levels or the heavens, what seems like a panoramic view, and then a reluctance to return and feeling like you have a choice, but then you do come back because you have a feeling of unfinished business with this life. So what I've just given you is a very generic description of what's called the near-death experience, or the NDE. And a lot of people have had this. 3% of the population of the world is a large number. Some say it's even 5%. That's a lot of experience. Okay. Then on page 2, I simply remind you again that the world religions collectively, in their description of the afterlife, confirm a lot of the reports that people make. And I list here some of the main ideas. The survival of a non-material entity. In other words, the spirit or soul goes on. People see that. The being of light is named, differently in the different religions. Allah, the eternal Buddha, etc. A life review is affirmed. Some sort of, you could call it judgment, but that sounds so negative. A life review is affirmed in all of the religious traditions. And then meeting others as well. Some beings or souls that you recognize and some that you don't. Some that have historical significance perhaps. But meeting others, other spirits, is affirmed in the world's religions. Okay, and then friends, I just reminded you of some of the books about all this, the near-death experience. The classical one is halfway down, Life After Life. That was the first one that sort of grabbed the attention of the modern world, that you could actually study this thing called near-death experience independent of a religious or spiritual context. You could study it independently. And then people like Kubler-Ross, who's very famous for death and dying theories and learnings about that process. She also confirms a lot of near-death experience research. Then I put a bunch of other works there. Friends, there's you may have heard of Ibn Alexander. He is the neurosurgeon who was a complete skeptic about the afterlife. And then, he had a near-death experience that was quite long. For a whole week, his brain was pretty much non-functioning, yet he hadn't died. And then he comes back and with an elaborate story of where his consciousness went. The book that really sold like hotcakes about this was called Proof of Heaven, written by Ibn Alexander, a neurosurgeon. A neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife is the subtitle. Then he wrote a sequel to that book called Map of Heaven, which goes on describing his learning and how he found out, oh my goodness, if you study the world's religions and the world's spiritual traditions, you find enormous overlap with what he experienced directly. So friends, this is quite an unusual situation where a skeptical scientific guy who kind of, winked his eye every time he heard his patients talking about, a higher realm, he encountered that higher realm himself and then became a spokesperson for how science and spirituality should be dovetailing and complementing each other. Okay, so friends, what I did is I looked at these two books, Proof of Heaven and Map of Heaven, and I selected some of what he wrote describing the afterlife. And I'm hoping we can read this because it represents pretty much all of the literature that there is about the near-death experience. And he's very articulate in describing what he saw, what he experienced. Okay, I see that some people here, I'm going to call on people who I think might be willing to read and see if they will. I always start with Kathy because she probably won't refuse.
Kathy, that's true.
At the bottom of page 2 is, I call it paragraph 1. We'll read several of these paragraphs, not all the ones, but let's just read 1, 2, and then 4, and maybe I'll read 7. Okay, that'll give us a sense of how he described the higher realms. Okay, Kathy.
All right, 1. Higher than the clouds, immeasurably higher, flocks of transparent orbs, shimmering beings arced across the sky, leaving long streamer-like lines behind them. A sound, huge and booming like a glorious chant, came down from above. Seeing and hearing were not separate in this place. I could hear the visual beauty of the silvery bodies. I could see the surging, joyful perfection of what they sang. It seemed that you could not look at or listen to anything in this world without becoming a part of it, without joining it in some mysterious way. Everything was distinct, yet everything was also part of everything else.
Okay, you see what I mean? He's very articulate about a certain kind of experience which represents a large body of reporting. I'm going to call on someone else for number 2. Sue, are you willing to read number 2? Please unmute if so.
Number 2, a warm wind blew, a divine breeze. It changed everything, shifting the world around me into a higher octave, a higher vibration. I began wordlessly putting questions to this wind. Where is this place? Who am I? Why am I here? The answers came instantly in an explosion of light, color, love, and beauty that blew through me like a crashing wave. These bursts didn't simply silence my questions, they answered them, but in a way that bypassed language. Thoughts entered me directly. My situation was something akin to that of a fetus in the womb. The mother was God, the creator, the source who is responsible for making the universe and all in it. This being was so close that there seemed no distance at all between God and myself. Yet at the same time, I could sense the infinite vastness of the creator and could see how completely minuscule I was by comparison.
I find this really thrilling reporting, you know, even from a purely dramatic point of view. Okay, I'll go to page 3 and then look at paragraph 4. Anyone else willing to read? Sherry or Richard, Belinda, Richard, you willing? Okay, how about...
I have a lot of background noise, so someone else needs to read. I have a lot of background noise here.
Okay, we won't bother you then. All right. Richard, paragraph 4, if you're willing.
This whole adventure was some kind of tour, some kind of grand overview of the invisible spiritual side of existence. In the world above, to know and be able to think of something is all one needs in order to bring myself there. No,
to move toward it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
To think of the spinning melody was to make it appear. This is confusing. And to long for the higher worlds was to bring myself there. Nothing can tear us from God. This knowledge robbed the realm of the earthworm's eye, view of its terror, and allowed me to see it as not entirely pleasant, but no doubt necessary part of the cosmos. There is a sense in which all the losses that we undergo here on earth are in true variations of one absolutely central loss, the loss of heaven. Emotions are different up there, but they're deeper, more spacious. They're not just inside, but outside as well. Countless beings were surrounding me. These half-seen, half-sensed hierarchies of beings stretched out in the dark above and below were praying for me. Oh, that's different than what I've heard before.
Thank you. Harold? Harold might be frozen.
Yeah, I think we've lost Harold.
Okay.
He wanted us to read number 7 next.
Okay. All right. Belinda, do you want to read number 7?
Yes, I'd be happy to. We are in the midst of the most significant leap in human understanding in history. In 200 years, the worldview we currently live within will seem as limited and naive as our children's to our children's as that of a medieval peasant seems to us. Our culture is obsessed with youth because we have lost the ancient knowledge that growth never stops. We are not transient, momentary mistakes in the cosmos. We are players who are here to stay, and the universe was built with us in mind. We reflect it with our deepest loves and loftiest aspirations, just as it reflects us, as above, so below.
Beautiful, thank you. So we did lose Harold. How about we read some of these other ones? Because I see next we're going to move into the Baha'i beliefs, and so I don't want to do that without him. So let's see, I think we didn't read number 3. Is that right? So would someone here be willing to read number 3? I know Dorothy and Sherry have some background noise. Sue, could you read number 3?
Yeah, I can go back to 3. Sure. Number 3. There was not one universe, but many, more than I could conceive. But love lay at the center of them all. Evil was present in the universes, but only in trace amounts. Evil was necessary because without it, free will was impossible. And without free will, there could be no growth, no forward movement, no chance for us to become what God longed for us to be. I saw the abundance of life throughout the countless universes, including some whose intelligence was advanced far beyond that of humanity. I saw that there are countless higher dimensions, but that the only way to know these dimensions is to enter and experience them directly. Cause and effect exist in these higher realms, but outside our earthly conceptions of them. The world of time and space in which we move in this terrestrial realm is tightly and intricately meshed within these higher worlds. All worlds are part of the same overarching divine reality. From those higher worlds, one could access at any time or place in our world.
Great, thank you so
Fred.
much.
Sorry, yeah, I got lost. You read paragraph 3 too,
as well as 7.
As well as
7 and then 3. So we were stalling till you got back. So that was perfect.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, friends, I hope that worked. You see, I just picked paragraphs that I thought were describing the central experiences that throughout 2 books, 2 short books, but very powerful books. Okay. Any comments on all that before we go on? Comments on what you heard? Impressions? Yeah.
A lot of it's very familiar to the Latter-day Saint teachings.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think people from a lot of traditions might say that. Yeah,
going back to number 1, where it was talking about a long streamer-like line behind them. Yes. My mother-in-law had an out-of-body experience, and she said there was a long tethered line to her when she left her body and went visiting.
Very interesting. A tether.
Yeah, it was like a silver thread that went back to her body.
You know, the idea he expressed these seeing of other beings too. That really impressed me. And other things that look like a little bit like what we're used to here. You know, trees and animals and bodies of water, etc.
My attention. Sorry.
Yeah, Gordon.
What caught my attention was how detailed. I'm thinking, how did he store all these memories of what he saw? But you said he was down for a week. I mean,
yes.
I have a hard time remembering what happened an hour ago, let alone he's studying a week's worth of memories.
Yeah, you know, luckily his son helped him sort of process his memories over a year, you know, very slow. At first, things were coming back slowly. Okay, friend, speaking of that, I want to jump to what page 8 for a very good reason. You know, this guy who we just heard from, Ibn Alexander, there's a figure who's been extremely influential, though he's not well known to the public. He influenced a lot of people in high places, and his name is Emanuel Swedenborg. I gave you a 1-page summary of him, page 8. I just want to quickly refer to you and try to explain why I want to bring him up now. That it's because this is a man who, like Ibn Alexander, had impeccable scientific credentials. You know, he served the government of Switzerland, and this is way back in between 1688 when he was born and 1772. So in the 1700s, he was a very distinguished scientist and well-respected in Sweden and influential all over Europe in various sciences, geology, physiology, psychology, etc. But he always wanted to know what invisible reality was about, the spiritual realms. From the time he was a child, he had that you might say a prayer, a constant prayer. And he believed in something called the doctrine of correspondence. which means everything we see in this world has a heavenly or a spiritual correspondent. So it's as if our consciousness goes back and forth between two realms, the spiritual realm and the material realm. And he says this doctrine of correspondences goes way back to an ancient prophet who the Greeks referred to as Hermes, but was called Enoch. It's the Hermetic literature. This prophet is given different names in different traditions, but his main teaching was as above, so below. That's the theme. In other words, as it is in the spiritual realm, so it is in the physical realm or earthly realm, and vice versa. So this Swedenborg guy was an impeccable scientist who knew about this literature, the Hermetic literature, and was fascinated by the theme. And now I'm reading directly what I have on page 8. In 1743, at the age of 54, he had a 2-year spiritual crisis leading to a career as a religious reformer and spiritual visionary of the New Jerusalem. He had a series of dreams, ecstatic visions, trances, and illuminations in which he claimed to visit heaven and hell, communicating with spirits while observing celestial life, and being shown some features of the visible and invisible realms. Friends, he wrote 8 volumes of description about what he saw. And people in high circles, other great intellectuals like Immanuel Kant and a poet like William Blake were very fascinated by this guy. And a Buddhist scholar named D.T. Suzuki called Swedenborg the Buddha of the North. Okay, so this is a very unusual figure. If you met him, you'd say he's a very earthly, practical, he uses ordinary language, he's sort of intellectual, in other words, he's not an erratic figure at all. Like he talked common sense language. And his prayer to see what the invisible realms are like seems to have been answered. You know, a lot of people thought this guy went crazy. And when I didn't know much about him, I wondered about him myself. And then I actually looked at, I researched him and I saw he was a very stable, he had a very stable personality. So in other words, it was almost like he became a sociologist of heaven. He studied what's going on up there in scientific language, okay? All right, and he started to have abilities like he knew about a fire 300 miles away. He knew Stockholm was burning, and people thought he was crazy for saying that, and then it turned out he was correct. All right, he influenced people like Helen Keller, Rudolf Steiner, Mary Baker Eddy, Edgar Allan Poe, William Blake, as I said before. Okay, so here are some of the quotes from him. Why don't I give these to, Kathy, can you read the first 2? I'm on page 8 where he says, man does not die. This is his language, Emanuel Swedenborg, describing the higher realms.
Okay, yes. Man does not die, but is only separated from his corporeal form. Man passes from one world to another. There was a drawing and pulling of my mind and spirit, and I was brought to the heavenly realms. I saw that spirits converse with each other by a universal language. Every man immediately after death comes into this universal language. All the faculties of spirits are in a more perfect state, including their sensations, thoughts, and perceptions. All the particular things which man has at any time thought, spoken, or done, from his earliest infancy to extreme old age, are successfully brought into his recollection. There's nothing concealed in the ordinary world that is not manifested after death.
Okay,
keep reading.
What's that?
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else willing to read? Bev, please, can you continue? Yeah, finish that section if you would. And yeah, Bev.
The light of the Lord permeates the hereafter. Heaven is a replication of earth with souls who are angels. In both spheres, souls carry on life in cities and communities with work, leisure, marriage, war, and crime. Both spheres have societal structures, hierarchies, and governments. It is possible for souls to advance in the afterlife. People assign themselves to heaven or hell and to particular stations within these realms by their own highest loyalties and attractions. The human mind, in accordance with which man, is formed into three regions in accordance with regions found in heaven. In the first degree, in which are also the angels of the highest heaven, the mind is celestial. In the second degree, in which are the angels of the middle heaven, the mind is spiritual. And in the third degree, in which are the angels of the lowest heaven, the mind is natural.
Okay, friends, I hope you don't think I'm crazy for showing you this guy. I think he's, in other words, the beliefs that many people have, he systematically organized the view of the afterlife based on his own experience, and he reported it in a semi-scientific way. And he influenced people like Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saints, Immanuel Kant, one of the most important thinkers, in Western history, and poets, etc. So he's a guy who went under the radar, who should not have, because of his importance, I believe. And now that we've rediscovered, near-death experience research, his writing looks especially illuminating, and corroborates many of the things that we've been studying in this course. Okay, friends, any questions so far? Comments, complaints, whatever?
The last one there, where it describes the 3 degrees of glory, that
Yes.
comes straight out of the book of Corinthians.
Out of the book of Corinthians.
Yeah,
so
1 Corinthians 15.
There's overlap between scripture and what he describes.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And okay, and there are levels of heaven. I think other faith traditions that we've looked at say that too. Levels, right? You might distinguish between a lower level of the afterlife, which is dark, and a middle realm where you can learn and advance, and then a higher realm. Okay, friends, I'm back on page 3 now, the bottom of the page. This is looking at the Baha'i Faith. And as a Baha'i, I can tell you there's enormous overlap between a lot of near-death experience reporting, the teachings of other religions, and testimonies like Swedenborg, too, to me, sound roughly parallel to some of the teachings of the Baha'i Faith. So I summarized the Baha'i Faith at the bottom, founded by Baha'u'llah in the middle of the 19th century, who claimed that the same God, who sent Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha to enlighten the world, also sent him, and that all the religions are essentially one. Religious understanding unfolds or develops across the ages. That's called progressive revelation. Among the principles of the Baha'i Faith are that science and religion are complementary. They complement each other. As if to say, the material world and the spiritual world, what we know about them shouldn't contradict each other. So that's a Baha'i teaching, as well as something that we're stumbling on as in this course, looking at scientific and religious teachings about higher realms. Okay, on page 4, I summarized some other aspects of the Baha'i Faith. I just want to lift up this term, prophet or manifestation. The Baha'i Faith, introduces a relatively new term, a manifestation of the divine, or manifestation of God, capital letters, as a prophet or a founder of a major religion, an intermediary between higher reality and human reality. And the Baha'i Faith says that the Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Baha'u'llah all have a very similar station. They had their manifestations, and they're educators too, of humanity about the invisible realms. In the middle of page 4, I described, I'm going to ask Sue. Sue, are you willing to read in the middle of page 4? It says the spiritual realm / afterlife. Can you read that paragraph?
Okay. Baha'u'llah taught that the soul is capable of making infinite progress after its temporary connection to the body, as we take on spiritual forms worthy of our new condition. Retribution and recompense in the next world are entirely spiritual. The terms heaven and hell point to moral and spiritual conditions, both here and hereafter. Though we cannot know the exact character of the afterlife, many helpful truths are revealed in Scripture, and learning continues in the other realms of God, where we will remember our own life on earth and where we commune with other souls previously known and unknown.
Okay, Sue, would you be willing to read the next one too? And then we'll turn to some scriptural passages from the Baha'i writings, okay?
Yeah.
Baha'i views of the journey of the soul in the next world.
The soul's condition in the afterlife cannot be fully known. The world beyond is as different from this world as this world is different from that of a fetus in the womb. Knowledge of the other world here would bring too much fear, sorrow, gladness, and longing to be useful in this world. Yet we are told that the soul retains its consciousness and individuality and remembers its life on earth while recognizing other souls and engaging in communion with them. We become acquainted with all mysteries and are informed of the secret of truth. Find the friends of God, both those of the former and recent times. The kingdom of God is a world of vision, where radiated light can bring the progress and advancement of all worlds.
Okay, so that's a generic description of Baha'i understanding or teaching about the afterlife. But I want to look on page 5. There, I picked out specific passages from the writings of the Baha'i Faith, just like I did, with the other faiths. So we won't look at all of these, but we'll look at some of them. And they say a lot of the same things that Sue just said, right? That was a more summary version. Okay, who else is willing to read? Who can I pick on? Bev, can you read 3, 4, and 5?
Sure. Bring thyself to account each day, ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. For death unheralded shall come upon thee, and thou shalt be called to give account for thy deeds. The nature of the soul after death cannot be described, nor is it permissible to reveal its whole character. The world beyond is as different from this world as this world is different from that of a child while still in the womb of its mother. When the soul attaineth the presence of God, it will assume the form that best befitteth its immortality and is worthy of its celestial habitation. Know thou of a truth that the soul, after its separation from the body, will continue to progress until it attaineth the presence of God in a state and condition which neither the revolution of ages and centuries nor the changes of this world can alter. It will endure as long as the kingdom of God.
Okay, friends, I want to draw your attention to something that we've seen before in the near-death experience reports, and sometimes in the other faith traditions that talk about the afterlife. So people who've gone there and come back, they often say, I can't describe what happened. I need to describe it, but I can't describe it because the words I'm using don't quite fit. Okay, earlier tonight, we heard Ibn Alexander very eloquently describing things, but how long did it take him to get eloquent about it? It took a while. So he was unconscious for a week, almost died, had a very elaborate, near-death experience. And gradually, as he healed, the memories he was able to turn them into words. But at first he was saying, I went somewhere and it's way beyond my ability to talk about it. Gradually, he was able to talk about it and it actually became quite eloquent. But people, there's been conferences where people who have near-death experiences, they're there and they're asked to describe it. And almost all of them say it's ineffable, but then slowly they start to describe it, right? Always qualifying it. I think that, even Swedenborg did some of the same things. Even though he wrote 8 volumes, he sometimes would say, this is a little hard to say in ordinary language. I'm doing my best. But overall, he's saying, all the things we're used to on Earth, there's sort of a cosmic version of that, much larger than we can possibly grasp. That's beyond, our limited understanding of time and space. Okay. Any questions, comments? I see Richard. Please, a hand is up. Yeah.
Something I found confusing that didn't map to everything else that we've read.
Yeah.
Is that one quote where he was talking about what he experienced, and he said, life there is like life here, in which we have good, evil, peace, and war. Very sort of a similar pattern, almost like the Greeks and the Romans thought of the gods as being just like sort of super people.
Okay, you're talking about Swedenborg's description, right? Yeah, on page 8. Yeah, right. That's what he said. Okay, so his is a much more detailed, 8 volumes. So there's no larger or description of the afterlife than Swedenborg's in all of human history. We get little flashes from scriptures, and then sometimes we get testimonials that can even be a book length, like from Ibn Alexander. Okay, I'm not saying everyone has to believe that, but he is saying there are things like war and peace in heaven, things like flowing water, things like species. He says, one of the things I found amazing, he says, we put ourselves in higher or lower realms by what we're attracted to. So it's almost as if the judgment is a very internal process to your soul. You can decide to make progress. You can decide to hang around in lower levels. A little bit like what happens in this life. We have volition. We make choices about how we spend our time. We make moral decisions. So he's saying there's an equivalent. That's what Swedenborg says, and he fleshes it out in way more detail than probably anyone else has. Other traditions, like even the Baha'i writings, say you can make progress in the afterlife. You can make progress. You can get closer to God. I think Baha'u'llah says it's hard to go backwards there. I'm interpreting. You can make progress, but you can't slip back. You can sort of stay stagnant or make progress. That's Harold's interpretation. Okay, of what Baha'u'llah said. Let's finish up some of the Baha'i quotes, and then I want to turn to one more.
I see Sue has a question.
Yeah, please, Sue. Yeah.
I'll quick. But Harold, I thought when we go to the next world, we only take the good stuff with us. Like, yeah. It's along this, what you were talking about is you can only progress, you can't go back. But yeah.
But Baha'u'llah says we see what our hands have wrought, and it can be very painful, right? That's even one of the quotes I've given you. It's number number 6 describes both positive and negative experiences in terms of what you remember. Anyway, again, yeah, no need to, there's a lot there and needs to be consulted upon to get its full depth. I want to, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go
carry
ahead.
on. You know, one of the Baha'i scholars, John Hatcher talks about, you know, what, you know, this is a testing ground. What's the purpose that we start out? We're spiritual beings with the body. So why do we start as spiritual beings? And it's more like a testing ground with the free will. So if we choose spiritual stuff, we'll end up maybe in a better level in heaven. But if people don't, everybody goes to the next world, but they're further back along the path if they haven't, you know, if they don't have much good stuff to bring with them. So, but they can progress, right?
They can progress. You know, to me, that I mentioned the very first, when this session just began and the first session and the whole course, that's the purpose of looking at the afterlife. It casts a whole new light on this realm as a school or a testing ground, a moral testing ground and spiritual testing ground that we can advance so that we get into a higher position, you know, when we graduate, so to speak, from this realm, the physical realm. Okay, friends, I want to look at two more quotes and then look at one more scientific-like topic, the mind and the brain. I just want to bring up that topic again in light of what we're looking at, levels of reality. So number 9, Kathy, can you read number 9 to us?
Yes. As to the question whether the souls will recognize each other in the spiritual world, this is certain, for the kingdom is the world of vision, where all concealed realities will become disclosed. How much more the well-known souls will become manifest. The mysteries of each man is heedless in this earthly world. Those will he discover in the heavenly world, and there will he be informed of the secret of truth. He will recognize persons with whom he hath been associated, undoubtedly the holy souls, who find a pure eye and are favored with insight, will, in the kingdom of lights, be acquainted with all mysteries. Likewise will they find all the friends of God, both those of the former and recent times, present in the heavenly assemblage.
You know, I found those last 2 lines utterly and completely thrilling. You know, someone like me, you know, I'm a philosopher type that's seeking truth. And this is saying, behold, the secret of truth will be revealed to you. Oh my goodness. And you're even going to meet people that have already lived. I get to see Plato and Aristotle and Mother Teresa. This is all, anyway, this is how I'm understanding this. I don't say I have an absolute clear understanding of it. This is what the impression I'm getting from that guidance that Kathy just shared. Okay, let's just look at number 10, and then I want to jump and look at the mind-brain thing and look back over the whole course, gather any impressions and things you want to share. I think I'm going to skip those. Well, no, I want to look at the last part of 11. It's talking about, 11 is talking about the prophets and messengers. And then it says, the light which these souls radiate is responsible for the progress of the world and the advancement of its peoples. They are like unto leaven, which leavens the world of being, and they constitute the animating force through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. You know, it looks to me like the source of what we call art and what we call science is the higher realm. So progress in this world means openness to the light of the higher world. That's how I'm interpreting this one here. It's quite fascinating. So that means science and art and all kinds of creativity flashes from the blue. I love that phrase, the blue, referring to higher realms of existence. So in the afterlife, we go right directly into that higher realm, which is the source, you know, of wonders and mysteries in this life that we're acquainted with. And we call that the advancement of culture, right? The creation of beauty, the discovery of truth. All right, Friends, okay, the last page 6 and 7, I'm going to summarize very quickly and not read all that stuff. But, you know, there's a bunch of researchers that have discovered what we call the mind and what we call the brain are related, but they're not identical. So they're sort of slowly saying, they're saying things like this, you know, the mind seems to be something that can direct the brain. Your ordinary consciousness can give a suggestion to your brain. There's even a name for that. It's called neuroplasticity. At the bottom of page 6, I give you some quotes from a neurologist who's quite famous in Europe, Pim van Lommel, and I summarize some of his research. This was, again, another scientist who worked with people who had cardiac arrest, and he watched what happened to their brain. And so he slowly started realizing the reports of these people who didn't quite die, who were in cardiac arrest but came back, he said they had consciousness, they had knowledge of things. They had knowledge of the room they were in. They had knowledge of the people who came to them. Their brain wasn't working, but they could report all this. So he very reluctantly started to believe, you know, the mind or consciousness is not identical to the brain. The brain can be dead and consciousness be operating very effectively. So he came to believe in scientific terms that consciousness is not local to the brain. You know, here's a simple way to put it. This is Harold's way of putting it. I can time travel. My mind can go back to ancient Greece. It can go back to ancient China. I can study it. It's as if I am living there when I study it. Then I can jump into the present. Then I can extrapolate and theorize about the future. You see, so consciousness can really move around in time and space. I think everybody has ordinary experience of that. But now, you know, researchers of the mind, rather of the brain, and who know about cardiac arrest and, you know, near-death experience, they're pushed by their experience to get interested in this. Anyway, so this guy, Pim van Lommel, became a believer. The mind is related to the brain, but is not the same thing. It's higher. And then on page 7, he uses this brilliant analogy of the TV set. You know, the programs in the TV are not in the TV. They come from far away. And the TV is like the brain that can attract consciousness and interpret it, right, or through the mind. And the brain can't do it all by itself, but in cooperation with the mind, we download programs, so to speak, that come from elsewhere. Okay, so this is the way he was talking himself into believing that the brain is like a transceiver. It can receive non-local consciousness, which for him is like another scientific way of talking about spiritual reality and higher realms of existence.
So how would that be what you call bright ideas? Like, I think it was Einstein was saying that he would have a flash of understanding of something would appear to him that made sense of what he's been trying to figure out for a long time.
And where did that come from? You see, so this is trying to explain that. This is like saying, so the brain and mind can be tuned into other programs, so to speak. I want to give you his language. Let me just read this is almost hilarious. Page 7, he says, we are not aware of the hundreds of thousands of telephone calls, television and radio broadcasts, internet connections around us day and night, passing through us and through the walls. We are not aware of these electromagnetic information waves until we switch on our cell phone, TV, radio, or laptop. But what we receive is not actually in the place. Connection appears to be non-local. The computer does not produce the internet any more than the brain produces consciousness. And he goes from there to say, anyway, this is just one example of mind brain research that is very telling. And it provides a scientific basis for believing in higher realms of existence that we know a little bit about, through things like near-death experience and spiritual experience, and through revelation, through divine guidance that's actually written down. Friends, I'll just say one more thing and then open it up for discussion about tonight's topics as well as the whole course. At the bottom of page 7 there, I have a Baha'i view of interacting levels of reality. I got this from the book I think Sue has been talking about. John Hatcher wrote a book called Close Connections, and it's about the bridge between physical and spiritual reality. I'm going to save you reading 400 pages and tell you the essence of that book. He's basically saying the mind is the missing link between higher realms of the spirit and lower realms, including the brain and the body and the physical world. That's like saying the mind can attend to things lower than itself and things higher than itself, depending on, its own choice, right? We have volition. So I say there are spiritual realms above, including God, Holy Spirit, manifestation, prophet. And then the bridge is the mind, which includes imagination, thought, understanding, memory, etc., and a common faculty that links the inner mental states and the outer sensory powers. And then below that mind or bridge are physical realms, the brain, with its powers of cognition, sensation, emotion, other bodily organs, the whole social world, and the natural world. All of that is physical reality. So the mind is this intriguing thing that is not the brain. It's above the brain, and it can turn upwards and downwards, and is sort of the missing link between the spiritual realm and the material realm. I always wondered, how do you connect the spiritual realm to the material realm? And this guy is sort of answering that. The mind does that. It's a very unusual creation in the whole universe. Okay, friends, that's the summary I wanted to give you of Baha'i views of this topic, and mind and consciousness research and near-death experience research, and how science and religion and spirituality may not be opposing forces. They seem to be dovetailing forces. They seem to be able to teach each other something. Okay, questions, comments, observations, complaints. I hope you don't have a headache, but I was trying not to. We didn't cover all 8 pages, but I think I gave you the essence of what this long handout was about. Because I was trying to synthesize modern knowledge, science, as well as a whole new faith, the Baha'i Faith, and even mention people who are spiritual but not religious, and humanist agnostic types. What do they think? And, add this to our study of how afterlife is understood by humanity down through the ages. How many of you ever heard of this guy, Emanuel Swedenborg? I'm just curious.
Just the name.
A few of you have. Oh my goodness, you're enlightened beings then, because he really has flown under the radar, this guy.
Harold, I have a book of all his teachings. I haven't read it. Yeah. I forget where I got it. I may have gotten it from Brian Murdoch, but it's a great big thick book, which is the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg.
Yeah,
I looked at it, but it was hard to read.
Well, I gave you half a page on him just to sort of cut to the quick.
That rings a bell, something about a religion. Is that true? There's a name of a...
there's a church called the Church of the New Jerusalem. It grew up after him. If you look at my page 8, I have a line there. Where did I put Swedenborg? Yeah, Down there it says in 1787. You see, he died in 1772. 15 years after he died, his followers founded the New Jerusalem Church.
What's Swedenborgianism or whatever?
Swedenborgianism, that's right. Sometimes it's called the Swedenborgian Church or the Church of the New Jerusalem.
Harold, wasn't he a bishop in the Swedish church or something?
Not Swedenborg, because he was a scientist. This is what I've been trying to say about this guy. You would not have expected this. No, if you found that, I don't think that could possibly be true. His whole education was science, and then he started having these revelations, and which shook up the church. The church was quite angry at him, and scientists were angry at him. In fact, everybody was angry at him. He forced everybody to move their furniture around in terms of how they have organized their consciousness, right? So that's why another reason we haven't heard of him. He's a black sheep in intellectual and spiritual history.
Gives you an idea that the scientists and the religious leaders each have their own frozen thinking.
Frozen thinking, that's a nice way to put it.
They don't want to admit anything because they would lose following if they did.
Well, I think I had to choose the Baha'i Faith for that reason, because it's very welcoming of science. I mean, other faiths are welcoming too. Baha'i Faith makes it an essential principle, the complementarity of science and religion, that we have one reality that has a material dimension and spiritual dimensions, and they're related. It's not like never the twain shall meet, right? But there are parallel points of view to that in other traditions. Yeah, so that's one purpose of a course like this, to sort of make you look at the whole panorama of revelatory guidance, and even study of the afterlife, such as we have access to it, and see if it all makes sense. See if you can put it together.
Harold, I have a question, which has to do with meditation or contemplation. And I'm just wondering how that fits in, especially with this idea of consciousness and the mind being somewhat different than the brain, and how with meditation, there's the way that if you can get deep enough into it, that you that's how you connect with spirit or Buddha nature, or like really get kind of past a lot of what we have, in our normal daily dramas.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that's, I don't know, I'm just wondering if you can speak to that at all, because that seems like...
That's my favorite one of my favorite topics. The Baha'i writings say meditation is being receptive to spiritual reality. So there's other words for that. Discernment, pondering, praying is in a sense doing that too. In fact, prayer and meditation are sort of seen as almost like a horse and a carriage. We should do both, quite a bit of it. A lot of Baha'i writings say that through meditation, all the great works of art come into existence. Scientific discoveries are made. Personal growth can happen. You get suggestions of where to go next. So, and Buddhism has an enormous array of techniques. So the religions are not equal in terms of the number of devices that they generate. The Baha'i Faith is interesting. It says meditation is very important, but it prescribes no particular way to do it, as if to say, we already have a lot of techniques in the world, right? And Buddhism and Hinduism really emphasize it, especially Buddhism seems to be. Different kinds or approaches to meditation. But for example, Baha'is are told, well, pray or read the guidance, but then meditate upon it, ponder its meaning. So when you do that, you're it's not actually thinking so much as intuiting or receiving light, which is a metaphor, receiving light. So Baha'i writings say we can even know the secrets of things in themselves, by being receptive to this whole realm sitting there above us, so to speak. Anyway, so that's a Baha'i angle on meditation, which is not meant to be inconsistent with any other angle on meditation. There's even scientific study. You've heard of John Kabat-Zinn? John Kabat-Zinn, maybe 30 years of research on what are the benefits of meditation. It can reduce pain. It can get rid of any number of problems. It can make bad kids good kids in school, right? It can change the work environment. You can increase productivity, creativity through meditation. So now science is figuring out a way to study meditation. And it's quite thrilling,
Harold,
please.
Recall a comment made that someone said that prayer is sending out, like transmitting a request or a thought or a wish. Meditation is when it comes back. Praying and meditating are not the same thing. You're not trying to accomplish the same thing. You're meditating on the answers which are in the writings.
They're not the same thing, but they're very complementary.
Oh, you don't have a transceiver with only half.
I heard the other day that prayer can be reduced to 3 words: thanks, help, and wow. So meaning there's 3 kinds of prayers, You're asking God for help, you're thanking God for the help, or you're being impressed with the majesty of the universe.
Harold,
Okay.
When I was an Anglican, they said, look at the word acts, A-C-T-S. A is for adoration, so praise God. C is for confession. T is for thanksgiving, and S is for supplication. So another way of looking at it. So that's 4 things.
Very good. I wrote an essay recently that talked about the 4 P's: prayer, pondering, planning, and performing. And in my mind, that is a problem-solving technique, a community-building technique. But it's talking about some of these same processes. Prayer and pondering that's prayer and meditation. Pondering is another word for meditation, showing how widespread that is. When you read something and then close the book, you're still thinking about what you read, except it isn't a discursive kind of logic. It's a more receptive, intuitive process. That's meditating, that's pondering, that's contemplating. I believe. Some types of meditation say, try to get rid of all thoughts, purify the mind, clean it up, right? And others say, it's more of associative meditation. You're following an image. Like guided meditation is taking you through a story sequence. That still counts as a type of meditation. So meditation, I don't think people should say it's getting rid of thoughts. It may use thoughts. It may use them and ask for another process, a receptive, intuitive type of process.
Part of the reason for my question about meditation is I just watched the movie. It came out a long time ago, The Dhamma Brothers. And it's about a Vipassana group in Alabama that was teaching meditation to prisoners in a maximum security prison. And they did an intensive 10-day, like the Vipassana retreat that you do where it's silent and it's 10 hours a day of meditation for 10 days. And I myself wouldn't have expected that to work with prisoners because I would figure they were used to meditate. They're not used to it. And that would be a lot for any of us, even those of us with a practice. But it was apparently so transformative. And also, like, for instance, one of the prisoners, his daughter had died. And so he had all this anger, and that's part of what motivated him to do what he did that got him in prison. But when he was in that state, his daughter appeared to him and let him know that she's okay. And that helped him let go of some of this anger. And it was very interesting because some of what they were sharing was almost like they were in this near-death experience kind of state. This like place that isn't exactly where we are. And in accessing that helped them let go of stuff. And so now they're kind of checking in, and they've, many of them are now no longer in the maximum security prison. like they've kind of worked through some of that. And so it was just really amazing. So I was wondering, like, if that's a way to access that without having to, get hit by a car or something,
That's fantastic. So I'm really glad you brought this up. So a meditation is a kind of a safe way, a non-near-death experience, encounter with higher realms, right? So you can do it because you're forced to, because the body locks down. That's the near-death experience. Or because you deliberately decide to open yourself up to higher realms, right? That's a fascinating story. A lot of healing took place for that person, enormous amount of healing. Yeah, I've been tempted once. I wonder, what if I taught a course like Women Mystics in a prison? What would happen? Or Afterlife, this course, could I teach it in a prison? Would people be receptive to it? Would it make a difference? It might well, it might well. If people, you're asking them to sort of use a faculty that hasn't been used before, right? It's been in abeyance, right? These are rough and aggressive people. And then suddenly they have nothing better to do than go on a 10-day Vipassana insight meditation retreat. I'm not surprised that brought out new things for some of those prisoners. Friends, those of you who've stuck in here the whole time, what do you think about this course?
Oh, hey, I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dorothy. She just did me a sign like this. Thank you, Dorothy. Wow. Yeah, Belinda too. She's in Ottawa, so it's 2 hours later. Wow. You get 2 stars for every 1 star that everyone else gets for coming.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. Partly as a result of this course, I was re-looking at some stuff I was interested in a while ago, and also investigating some material on the so-called axial age. And one of the things I realized from that was that, especially in the West, our Judeo-Christian Islamic religion and all its derivatives are all very, very powerfully underlain by the Zoroastrian teachings.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. One writer had a rather amusing way of looking at it. We're all wearing Zoroastrian underwear.
That was a Zoroastrian teaching, wearing underwear, and then it took off everywhere else, the civilized world.
It does seem to, and in fact, one writer I ran across referred to Zoroaster as the first prophet. Now, I'm not totally in agreement with that, but I get the point.
An early prophet. Yeah, early.
Maybe one in our era that we recognize and remember. Because I think there probably were a couple of people between Adam and Zoroaster.
Like Moses, for example, and Abraham and Noah and Hermes. This guy we mentioned.
That was the other thing you were referring to, Hermes Trigam. How do you say it?
Trismegistus. You can't pronounce that word. Don't worry about
it. My husband has told me about that so often, and I can't say the word either.
But this guy Swedenborg was an expert on that guy. Oh, another thing, Isaac Newton knew a lot about that, the Hermetic writing.
Isaac Newton was a very interesting fellow. He was a major mathematician and scientist. He was actually invested heavily in the slave trade, and he was.
That's not funny.
No, it's not funny.
Yeah, he had a mix, but
in those days, everybody was in the slave trade. Everybody.
Almost everybody. But what's not emphasized about Newton was his spiritual side. You see, that's been hushed up. That's a little bit embarrassing, but in my mind, it makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah.
As above, so below. He was showing what are the patterns that make the universe tick. He was quite a brilliant guy in some ways. Okay, friends, anything else about this course? I hope I did justice to the Baha'i Faith.
What are you going to do next?
What are we going to do? Well, whatever Kathy asked me to do.
Kathy, you gotta ask
Whatever you're working on. Every year, Harold's like, I have a new thing. I'm doing this thing. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Absolutely. Whatever you're interested in. That's great.
Harold,
I'm trying to write a book. I'm trying to write it. You know how Plato wrote dialogues? For some reason, I've always thought I could write dialogues, like philosophical, spiritual conversations. I want to try that, and I have a theory about how to solve a lot of problems that way. Anyway, who knows if I'll ever do that, but I want to line up voices that are reasonable, yet are different about talking about all the big questions. Why are we here? What is the future going to be like? Can science and religion really get along? Things like that. I have some very meaningful dialogues about that sort of bridge us into the future, give us hope for the dialogue that will create a more united world, united yet respectful of diversity.
Honest to God, I tried to write.
Haifa.
Sorry, what were you saying, Belinda?
I was wishing Harold a safe journey to Haifa.
Oh, she knows that I'm going to go to Israel. Yeah, it's a Baha'i pilgrimage to see Mount Carmel with my wife, Wendy, and the Baha'i shrines. And it's a very highly uplifting and educational experience. Second time I will have done it.
Oh, good.
And I'm wondering what's going to happen to my worldview on the other side of that. I'll come back and continue some of the
You're
other.
Walking 2 inches higher.
Higher and higher.
So when you're saying prayers at the shrines, Harold, open your mind to inspiration. You'll get an answer as to what you should do next.
Very good. There should be lots of pregnant, guidance.
I'll have to be listening for Kathy's voice slipping in there.
Oh, anyway, thank you so much, Kathy, for sponsoring this course. It's been fantastic. Thanks for hanging in, all of you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really been some very good discussions.
Kathy, didn't you want to say something?
Yeah, you were saying something before. Do you remember?
No, I was just going to say that's so funny, Harold, that's your interest. I tried writing a book about Israel and Palestine, about the conflict as a dialogue between a moderate Israeli and a moderate Palestinian, because I thought that would be the best way to do it. Because after trying to bring folks together, and I have about 4 completed chapters of it. It was intended to be about 12. And then I stopped working at it. So it's so funny that that's your interest, because I had that same idea. Kathy, so I don't know.
You and I are a case of parallel evolution.
I know what's going on. We have the same.
Finish that dialogue, and I'll try to start mine.
Wonder why you work together all the time.
No, it's great.
That's right. I sort of wanted to become an interfaith minister like Kathy. Then I meet Kathy. I said, "Wow, there's someone who actually did it and didn't just think about it." Amazing. Yeah.
It was always such a pleasure working with you. Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful trip.
Thank you so much. And I'll catch up with you later, somehow, some way. So 8:30, we're not even late. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks, Harold. Yeah, this was the interfaith approach to near-death experience.
That's right, the interfaith approach. Very good.
Very nice. Okay, have a good trip. Good to see everyone. Okay, righto.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Stay well, stay safe, and stay sane.
What's that?